Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Brass Junkies. I am your host, Andrew Hitz, and I went to bed last night at 7:45 p.m. How about that? Yeah, and I'm not even sick. And I'm joined by my co-host, Lance LaDuke. Lance, how are you?
I feel really buoyant today. I feel like if I was in a pool, I would really bob around in a pool because I feel buoyant.
Moving right along. Our guest today from the bustling metropolis of Waverly, Iowa, is Charles Lazarus. Charles is a phenomenal trumpet player, a thinker, a statesman, a model. What else does he do?
I was, for a trumpet player, he's got really good ideas and he's got really good execution, and he's innovating in the orchestra industry in ways that I don't know many other members of orchestras who have taken the bull by the horns like he has, and create some innovating programming and sort of get some cool things happening up at the Minnesota Orchestra.
He's the kind of guy that can take an innovation and innovate it. I mean, he's next level. So, great conversation with him from his hotel room in Waverly. Very quickly, there are three ways to help the show. First one is Patreon, which you can go to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies, and you can become a regular contributor to the show. A whole bunch of you have done that already. Thank you so much to those of you who have. Our next goal is $75 per episode. We are brainstorming right now, and we are still accepting submissions for what we're going to do for 75. Lance and I, the next time we are in the same room, are going to be posing for trumpet photos in April, as that was the reward. I put that in quotes for reaching $50 an episode. And there and beyond, we're going to get 100 at some point, we're hoping, and there's going to be something awesome. I don't know, maybe we'll just start paying people. I guess that would defeat the purpose of raising money. But you can also, number two, is you can leave a review and a rating on iTunes. Those of you who've done that, you rock. And some of you rock who haven't, but it's not because you haven't left a review and a rating. And third, you can share it with a friend. So
we should talk about the fact we're going to be at NERTEC. We're going to do a Brass Junkies live.
Oh yeah. Hey man.
Regional Tuba Euphonium Conference.
Yes. That's going to be really fun.
The end of April, and it's up at
Ithaca. Yep. We don't even know who we're interviewing yet.
No, that's true. We're going to do a late night live Brass Junkies from some establishment in front of a live audience.
I think it's going to be in front of a live audience. It might be a session at the conference. I don't think we've figured all that out yet. So Justin Benavidez, who teaches tuba and euphonium in Ithaca for the time being, he just accepted the position at Florida State, actually. So, he announced that like 2 days ago. So, as we sit here and recording this, it was 2 days ago. So, we will be interviewing him and then a couple of other people from the conference. So, we just got to see what the schedules look like. And, that's going to be a lot of fun. That was a good... and the other thing is that we are on Instagram. Our hashtag. I sound like a 70-year-old trying to talk about. I've actually literally been paid by people to do consulting work on social media, and I was just referring to our Instagram hashtag, which was not a hashtag. It's our handle on Instagram is Pray for Jens. Pray the number 4 Jens, and you can. We broke the streak for like a few weeks. We had only followed one person, which was Jens Lindemann, but now we follow some other folks. So check us out there. We're also on Twitter at Pray for Jens, and we need to thank Parker Mouthpieces for providing our hosting. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz artist model tuba mouthpiece. What? And the Lance LaDuke model euphonium mouthpiece.
Man.
Find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook. You can find their Instagram hashtag on Instagram, or also the Twitter tweet thing. They're there as well. So, I think that's it. Should we just
Awesome.
Should we get to the interview with the Charles?
Lazarus.
All right. Without further ado, here's our discussion with trumpet player and innovative innovator Charles Lazarus. And today we are joined by trumpet player extraordinaire. Aren't they all, though, Lance?
They're all extraordinary.
This one actually is, though. He's annoyingly good at an annoying number of genres. So our annoying guest today is Charles Lazarus. How are you, Charles?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Annoyed.
I like that. We're calling annoyed. We called you at your hotel because you're all that. You're like big shot. And they said, what room number, which is what, 408. So he's in room 408, people.
Yeah, come on by. We're having a party.
She said room, and she said name, and Andrew said Lazarus. People just randomly call and have different characters from the Bible. I'd like to be Moses.
That's right.
Jebediah. Ezekiel, please.
Oh, man.
Lazarus. Speaking.
I back from the dead. That's me.
So Charles texted us and said, that he had Skype up and running, but that the Wi-Fi was a little bit spotty. So if we wanted, we could call him. And here's the hotel number and the room number. And Lance said, "What decade is this?"
I know, it's amazing. Sometimes you get the Wi-Fi and it just doesn't work.
Well, it's just funny that you're on a wired phone right now. It's yeah.
I feel like I feel a little bit like I'm in prison because I can only move about 7 or 8 inches away from the phone because the cord is really short. So I'm kind of hunched over the desk right now, and I can barely reach my coffee.
Waiting to use it too.
Thank God I have my coffee right next to me, so I can reach that.
You have a whole roll of quarters, right? So you can just...
Right.
I think you now know exactly what it's like to be in prison.
I think that's what it's like. I just hope I don't need to go to the restroom.
And where are you on this fine planet?
I am in Waverly, Iowa, doing a concerto with the Wartburg College Symphony right now.
Huh. And what?
So, not to brag or anything.
What concerto are you playing?
The piece is a really fun piece by Steve Hitz, who is a composer that was commissioned to write a concerto for me that I premiered a couple of years ago with the Minnesota Orchestra, and which is where my regular job is, playing in the orchestra there. And it's called American Nomad, and it's sort of Leonard Bernstein meets Aaron Copland meets Gil Evans with some jazz improv in it, and it's a little cross-country trip from East Coast to the West Coast, and has some very fun improv moments in it, and a little tribute to rock guitarist Graham Parsons, and parts of it sound like people going crazy at Woodstock, and audiences really enjoy it. So it's a fun piece to play.
Wow. Why Graham Parsons? Are you a Graham Parsons guy, or was the composer, or how'd that get in?
That idea came more from Steve, the composer, and we sort of translated it to a plunger kind of blues-oriented section with it. But the idea was to have a true crossover concerto, and something that really sounded like American music, that had those qualities to it. And Steve's music really has that quality to it. But it was the first jazz-oriented piece that he had written, so we thought it'd be important to have more pieces like that in the rep, and especially something that maybe some college or conservatory kids could play, because now students are coming out of schools, and it's not as unique as it used to be for players to play many different styles. Now it's just kind of what people do because people know they have to be versatile to be employable. So, they're just, it's sort of either or, and there aren't a lot of hybrid pieces out there. So, we're hoping to get the piece out there and get a lot of people playing it.
Was it a commission, or he just is a friend of yours, or how'd that come about?
Yes and yes. Yeah, he's a good friend of mine, and so when I had the opportunity to have the piece commissioned for me, we had a short list of composers, and he seemed like a good choice. And he had a relationship with the Minnesota Orchestra already, and audiences there already knew his music pretty well, so it was a good fit, and the local aspect of it was useful there, and yeah, so it was an easy choice to have him do it. So, and since I do a lot of, I produce a lot of concerts in collaboration with the orchestra, so from not just the concertos, but I do full-length pops concerts where I front the orchestra and MC, and have special guests and do a couple of those a year. We thought having it with the Minnesota Orchestra and with Steve would be a good fit.
Let's stay right there. How did that come about? The producing orchestra concert.
That sounds really interesting.
Well, I mean, like you guys, from your experience, I mean, there are some groups where you do a lot of different styles of playing, and, Boston Brass is like that, Dallas Brass, Canadian Brass, all those kinds of groups do a lot of different kinds of playing, but they're outside of those specific groups, I guess I had, built, instead of building sort of one, like if I was building a city, instead of one giant skyscraper, I have built my career sort of like having, 100 buildings, and so, I've got I make most of my living playing in the orchestra. That's one facet, and then I have my jazz combo that I tour with, and then I compose a lot of my own music, and then I do some teaching, mostly just traveling around doing master classes. I don't do a lot of private studio teaching, and I started trying to connect the dots between those different parts of my career, mainly because it was really tiring doing all those different things, but I really liked the idea of trying to combine them. So the first thing I started doing, and this was years ago, is when people would write, just friends would write music for me, they would send me examples, and I would start writing other examples that I would send back to, like, maybe more like this or more like that, and how to combine different styles of music, until before I knew it, I had written a piece. And one guy, this guy John Lawson, who's a good friend of mine in Dallas, Texas, he finally got so frustrated. He's like, I've got an idea. Why don't you just play the piece that you just wrote and sent to me? And it was the first piece I had ever written. And I was like, well, maybe I could do some writing. And I really wasn't trained doing it, but I had a very specific idea of what I wanted to present. So that was the first step. So I had some original music that was, through composed. There were common threads, rhythmically or harmonically, and there were sections of improvisation that, some were just open, straight up jazz. Others were more like pop music or big band music, where they're very short solo sections. And I started doing that with my small group. But after I left Canadian Brass and came back to the Minnesota Orchestra, I took a year leave of absence to do that. I really started thinking about, well, how could I tie these two worlds together? And so then I started listening to, I don't know if you've heard, do you know Esquivel? Have you heard any of those recordings?
Oh, yeah, from the late 60s.
Yeah, it's like really great, like space age bachelor pad music. I mean, really crazy, funny, creative, like Latin lounge, exotica, sounding music, but with Bud Brisbois playing lead trumpet, and just these incredible arrangements, and really popular music that uses the orchestra as central to the sound of the popular music, not just like a backup band. Because nowadays most people think orchestra pops. It's like, oh great, you get a pop or Broadway star in front of an orchestra, and then you just play long notes as a backup band.
Right.
And I love playing pops, but I don't love that role, and so I wanted to have really great arrangers arrange pieces that would feature the sound of the orchestra, have people from the orchestra come up, the brass section come up front, or have a violin soloist, and really have it be integral, and have it be more like a popular music presentation, but focus on the sound of the orchestra. And so I started developing these different shows with arrangers to have the quartet be up front with me with the orchestra for the full show. And I did the first show I did had a lot of my original music on the first half, and then some Latin jazz covers in the second half. It was called The Night in the Tropics, and it was music from tropical regions all around the world. And then we started doing some different themes. So I think I've got 4 or 5 different shows I've done with the orchestra. And now what we're doing is there is a series of concerts we're doing every year where where I'll have special guests. So like the next one we're doing, there's a gospel group called the Steels that used to be on Broadway with a show called The Gospel at Colonus. and they were in a couple of movies. One of them was in the Prairie Home Companion movie, but they're in the Twin Cities. So I'm having them as a guest, and then I've got the keyboard player in my group is a pop music guy, and he really crosses over in those worlds, so he's able to sort of translate from gospel to orchestra and really make that work and fit me into it somehow. So it's been a long process, and just through that, with those ideas, I've partnered with a lot of people with the orchestra. I have a production company. I have a business partner who's helped me out in every possible way, with the concepts of these shows to help with the funding and all of that. And his name is Paul Grangard, and he's the CEO of Alan Edmonds Shoes, but also a trumpet player and a friend of mine. I used to teach his daughter, and he's on our board for the orchestra. And we created a few shows, and then he really felt that there should be a great American trumpet concerto that had these jazz elements. And so all of this sort of led to my friendship with him and the partnership with him, and then he wanted to commission the piece. So that's kind of how that came about.
That's pretty crazy. So
was that a short enough answer?
No, it's a good. Yeah, it's a good one.
First of all, you're pretty smart for a trumpet player.
Yeah.
Next,
that's really weird, isn't it?
Annoyingly so.
But like Andrew and I usually have to coach ourselves. Small words,
yep.
Remember? Small words.
Right.
So, how did you pitch this to the orchestra the first time? Like, who do you deal with in terms of behind the scenes? Like, how I don't know of other instances where orchestra members are. I'm sure that maybe it does happen all the time. It seems unique to me to have one of the orchestra members be pitching ideas like this and then having management listen to those ideas. There's two parts of it that are both kind of mysterious to me.
That is a little weird.
Well, it took about 10 years of me being just really annoying. Mm-hmm. That's really the truth of it. And it all depends, on when you're in an organization. The nice thing about a small group is that there's even if you don't run the group, you have direct access to people that do, and you have a strong influence. And if it's a partnership, then you have a really strong influence. But the liability of that is you don't have a gigantic marketing team that's going to get you on the news and get you in newspapers and send out e-blast to a giant list and flyers and postcards and all of that stuff, and have huge social media followings. Generally, smaller groups, it's harder to develop that, and it costs a lot of money. So the benefit of a big organization is that you get a lot of power behind your projects, but the liability of it is that there's a lot of red tape. There are a lot of people you have to go through, and there's a lot of leadership that you have to convince. And so so I had done, I guess at that point, maybe 3 shows with the orchestra, and we had this president of the orchestra, who is the guy that locked out the orchestra, Michael Henson, he was running the orchestra when I started doing this, and I was able to get a meeting with him and pitch the ideas, but the mentality was a lot more corporate, in that I gave a very long-winded explanation of what I wanted to do, because it was very mission driven. It wasn't just like, I want a gig, can you hire me to play the Tomasi? It wasn't that, because we've got a great principal trumpet player that does all that. What I do is different, and there was purpose behind it, and also purpose to bring in new audiences to Orchestra Hall. And at the end of the conversation, it was like, okay, well, it sounds like you've got some good programming ideas. We'll
call
let
you
know. And so they had meetings, and then it was all very behind closed doors, and but it did lead to something. They did put on some shows, and I continued to do it, but there was no real momentum behind it. But then when we had a change of leadership, we have Kevin Smith now, who is he's like the Michael Jordan of arts management. He completely transformed what the orchestra is and the way people work together. So it's a really, it's a really unusual circumstance where, you look forward to seeing the president of the orchestra and the general manager and the, And like my wife is the operations manager for the orchestra, and like that's not weird with my musician friends. It's like, let's go out for a beer after the concert, and oh, there's Kevin, the president, and come and join us, And it's like, it's because everyone has the mentality of teamwork. So that was a very lucky timing for me when we came back from the lockout, because there was a lot of there was a lot of interest in the audience in new things, and a lot of interest in the management of the orchestra to value musicians. So I just kept up with the pitches and the ideas, and then they started sort of framing more of a long-term plan. And then we have a great guy that runs our live orchestra hall series that does the pop stuff, Grant Meacham, and he's doing a program with a rapper coming up, and lots of very interesting creative programs. And what's interesting about it is when things are creative and unique, people actually come to it and buy tickets. It doesn't, being artsy doesn't mean that it's not going to make money. Sometimes, being creative is the thing that gets the buzz going and gets people in the door. So over time, it's gotten easier. The pitch has gotten easier because the management has been better. And also, the longer I do it, each audience has gotten a little bit bigger. So now we've got audiences that are big enough that then there's a financial expectation for the profit of the orchestra. So that works out really well. And, I can sort of see how, touring groups and touring soloists can do this in city by city by city. You have to build those audiences city to city. And, I haven't really done that, but I've certainly done it where I live and work, which is nice because, I can do it at home and go on the road when I choose, and the rest of the time I can be home with my family, which is nice.
That's pretty great.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
You mentioned Michael Kaiser is a consultant for the arts and has written a number of really great books. And his first book, basically, if you distilled it down to its core, it's program creatively and market aggressively, which is what it sounds like you've got going on there. Go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
Do you have an official role in terms of on the artistic creative side now? Or is that part of your gig?
No, it's not like that. It's not like a title position, but it's just a series of concerts that happens. But in our orchestra, the artistic advisory committee and the music director, along with our artistic administrator, named Kari Marshall, really work together, and the musicians have a very guiding and very central, equal role in all of the programming. So I was on that committee for 2 years when the orchestra came back, and we actually decided with Osmo Vanskar, our music director, and Kari, all the programming for basically 2 seasons.
Wow.
Particularly our principal cellist, who's like an encyclopedia of knowledge about rep. Because I always, was more useful on the non-classical side, because that was a strength, more of a strength of mine. But so there's a lot of influence, but not, not a title. But it can happen. I mean, like in Milwaukee, Mark Niehaus, went from principal trumpet to CEO of the orchestra. So I mean, those kinds of things can happen. But I'm not interested in that. I just want to put on the shows. So, but back to Michael Kaiser. He came and did a seminar for the orchestra. I think it was right when we came back, and it was incredibly inspiring. And he was talking about how it's so important to be connected to the people that support what you do, and how he would always go out in the lobby and meet people, and you get the volunteers excited. So it's kind of like social media. You have this awareness and you connect with people, and then that excitement builds on itself, and you never know where it can lead. And there was some elderly woman that he befriended that would just come to the concerts, and he would see her in the lobby at the Kennedy Center, because he ran the Kennedy Center, and I had no idea her situation, and somehow she came into some money, and now she is the highest philanthropic donor to the Kennedy Center in the history of the Kennedy Center.
Wow.
That's what he said. So so he was really talking a lot about the value of connection, and that's I think is definitely the case now.
And that's something that's pretty standard for the brass quintet world that all three of us come from in the past. Is going out in the lobby at intermission and afterwards, and shaking hands and taking photos and all of that stuff. It's so important.
Right. I have a question for you guys, because you shake so many hands. Do you worry about germs? Like, do you like, if you're at a reception, do you shake with the right hand and eat with the left hand?
I figure if I infect people, I infect people. It's a risk they're going to have to take.
So you're not worried about yourself. You're just accepting that you may spread something to others, right?
No. I don't really worry about stuff like that.
I like to shake Lance's hand after I've been touching a large amount of meat and fish, since he's a vegetarian now. So that's what I try to do.
I see.
We did used to send anybody who liked to hug over to JD because JD hates hugging.
That
is weird when people. That's a level of connection that can be uncomfortable.
That is true. We used to we didn't just send people over. We would specifically say, JD, the horn player, absolutely loves hugs. You should go give him a really big one. And they would just run over and give him a huge hug. And then you could see while he was being hugged, JD was scanning the lobby to try and see which one of us was looking at him and laughing. So he could decide who to kill later. So, yep.
JD's a little sweaty after a concert, so that was a commitment on both parts.
It was. Oh man, yeah.
Have you toured with anybody that's a fist bumper? Because I know there's some guys in our brass section that don't want to get sick before the big concert, so they're fist bumpers. Do you do that?
No, you're not speaking in code, right?
No, that's not
okay,
something.
Gotcha. All right. No, I don't.
I mean, not that I know of. It could be.
Inadvertently speaking,
right?
Unknowingly speaking in code.
I could be making a reference, that I don't understand. But
all right, I want to accidentally kind of bring us back around to a question that's popped into my head. So you came out of the lockout, and the orchestra seemed, from what I can tell and from what you're saying, it seems like things are healthy and as happy as can be, and you're having success. Now, I live in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Symphony just came off of a strike. And in what would be your advice, or, well, you don't have to say it that way. What components do you think make for a successful transition after a situation like that? I mean, to what do you credit the success you've had since the lockout?
I would say,
I don't want to get you in trouble, and I don't want you to be controversial.
No. I mean, it's just there's so many things. I would say it was the persistence of the musicians that kept playing concerts for our community. Mm-hmm. And your community could be whatever you're the people that follow your podcast, or the for an orchestra, particularly the local community. But when you tour, I mean, you have your international community and your relationships in those places. But as musicians, we can't convince Carnegie Hall we want to be in their series when we're locked out. We didn't have any control over that. That's a time and getting back on. But we could rent the convention center and play Shostakovich Symphony for people, which is what we did, and our audience really followed us and supported us, and
it was very impressive with how visible you guys remained throughout the entire process. It was very impressive.
And I have to say, Pittsburgh, the players here in Pittsburgh did a really good job of that as well, going out into the surrounding communities, not just downtown, but kind of out in the surrounding neighborhoods to do the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah, and what's really hard about it is that in a horrible situation like that, if it goes on long enough, people have to make a living, so they've got to travel.
Yeah.
And so during that period, I mean, it was 16 months or so. I think I was on the road a couple hundred days.
Wow.
During that period, just doing, and it's it wasn't like typical touring. It's like, okay, you're going to go to LA and play for a while, but you've got the plane ticket and, expensive hotels and, or maybe you're staying with friends. So it's really hard for everyone to be in the same place to play these concerts. So people not only tried to do that, but they would arrange and make choices about the work that they took so that they could do things that initially were for free and eventually made a little money. So we were able to make a little money off the concerts, but the important function, and really had our musicians committee was really strong. In fact, you guys know Doug Wright, who I played a brass quintet with in the orchestra. He was very interesting. What's that?
He was quoted in your paper just about every other day.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean he was an amazing leader in that situation. I mean the whole committee was, but I know Doug the best, and we're really good friends and have similar backgrounds with the brass quintet history. He played in Empire. for a while, and he. They worked really hard. They nearly, killed themselves with stress trying to make it happen. But that was the first thing, I think, staying connected to, our public, for lack of a better, and then we actually, we really became friends with them, because there were all these volunteer groups, and that, getting back to Michael Kaiser and the importance of having these support groups, these people that were passionate about what we were doing, and then created, groups to help support our endeavors. So the combination of that and then getting the right leader, and we have a really great leader with Kevin Smith, and Osmo Vansko was very loyal to us. But that's just our situation, and I think that would be true in many. But the way I look at progress in any kind of project or anything is, if there's difficulty, first of all, you've got to be able to have reasonable conversation, and if the conversation can't be reasonable to start off with, then you can't really have a conversation. So that's the first thing. But just in terms of the positive side of it, I always like to, if I'm going to collaborate with someone, identify goals, like be able to clearly say, this is my goal, I want to do yada, 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 yada. What do you want to do? And then you say yada, 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 yada. And if one of the yadas matches, then boom, there's a compatible goal. So, and then if you look at that goal and you see if there are any conflict of interest with that, if you've got a compatible goal and no conflict of interest, then it's a really easy conversation. Then you just brainstorm, like, okay, well, what resources do we have or skills do we have to achieve this goal? And that mentality, I think, came into play in that kind of situation, and it's definitely come into play for me with any kind of collaboration I've ever been successful with. It's always been identifying those compatible goals.
Well, that's pretty
so,
good.
But it doesn't always work. You can spend a lot of time spinning your wheels and looking for that and then not finding it. And I've certainly wasted plenty of time that way as well. So it's, as you know, it's not easy.
I'm really, it's nice to, I teach a music business class at Carnegie Mellon, and your loss was my gain in terms of the ability to talk to university students about the industry and the things that were happening, and we were following it, day by day, and sort of watching what was going on and discussing it. And it's so encouraging to hear you come out, you personally and you, the orchestra, come out the other side of it in a positive way, that you've been able to thrive, which is not a guarantee after a situation like that.
Well, that's the nice thing about, something horrible happening is like you fall off that cliff, and then, the next time you're walking past the ledge, you know what happens if you fall off that cliff. So even if there is a situation that is just begging for a conflict, if both sides sort of know where that edge is, you're just a little more cautious and a little more responsible in your choices.
Mm-hmm.
So that's there's always something good that comes out of that. You kind of hope that the same thing would translate to political discourse too. It's like you hope that if things are bad, that there can be lessons learned from it. So we'll see.
Yeah. For anybody that didn't, that's listening to this and didn't follow along, or hadn't even heard of it, it was, like you said, 16 months that had to have felt like about 5 careers strung back to back to back. In terms of, not getting paid, not being able to do what everybody wanted you to do. And there was, to say that there was uncertainty. It wasn't clear that there was going to be a resolution. It wasn't clear that there was going to be a Minnesota, orchestra as it's constituted. There was just so many. So it's just so wonderful that, it's so wonderful how it turned out. It makes me, and not just because I've got friends like you and Steve Campbell and other people in the orchestra, but just the community that you represent, and there's just so many places that are so happy that it has resolved itself how it did, which is a true testament to ultimately how the process played out. Is a true testament to both sides. I'm very happy for you and for everybody that it worked out how it did.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. It's kind of heartening to know, though, that it's not just Minneapolis. It's kind of, that people often will question the value of the arts. And, sure, it's not, a brass quintet or an orchestra or a trumpet soloist is not, it's not like a roof over your head and food in your belly.
Sure.
It's not a basic need that way. But, there's certainly a lot of value. And when people want to be inspired, like they might be by a great athlete or something, they might want to hear a great brass group. They might want to, if people are going to go out and spend money and put money into their local economy, which is a good thing. A lot. It turns out people want it to be really good. Nobody wants to go out and see a crappy movie. So why would you want to go hear a mediocre ensemble? You want quality, and people, I think, crave that. So even though we live in kind of a niche, I do think that there is more value for the quality of what we do than it might seem like. We might seem like we're in this kind of isolated niche, but I don't really see it that way. I see it as something that there is a need for, there's a lot of support for, and you can argue, philosophically, that why the arts are important, but ultimately, I mean, there are all these kinds. I'm sure you guys know that there's so many statistics. You're more likely to graduate from college, more likely to make more money, less likely to, go to jail for killing somebody. That's that's why they play music at the gas station. So people are less violent if they hear music, and but people are spending money when they go out to a concert. They're not just coming to the concert. They're they're buying gas and paying for tolls and going out for a beer after the concert and all that kind of stuff. So there's a real societal function that has value. And so what I like is the fact that when it's tested, it's pretty easy to prove the value of it, because it's real.
So
it's kind of a nice thing to think of, globally as well.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't want to spend the whole time talking about orchestras because you've done so many other cool things.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's talk about orchestras. So what, you're in a mini residency right now. How many days are you? What school are you at again? Tell me again.
Wartburg College. Wartburg. Yeah, it's
Wartburg.
Yeah, Wartburg. Yeah, this is a short one. I'm just I'm here to just play the concerto with their orchestra, like a community orchestra, and did a master class yesterday, and did a little seminar on collaboration and commissioning, and basically a business entrepreneurship bit last night after the rehearsal. So this is a pretty short one, and I do a fair number of these kind of things every year.
How did you?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, how did you get this gig?
I have a booking agent that's another trumpet player. So we argue like who can play higher and stuff all the time. But aside from that, it's great. And he's great, and he does a lot of these kind of clinic residencies. And I think this one, the guy, the conductor here, is a guy that used to work for the Minnesota Orchestra, so that was where the connection was. But I just have a guy that's working on booking these things and spends a lot of time on the phone and email, and makes it happen.
I'm sure that you
can you do with the orchestra?
I'm sorry, what?
How much travel can you do with how busy you are with the orchestra?
I try to do it during off times, or you can sometimes take a leave if it's a 2 trumpet week or something like that, because we have 4 full-time members, so we can rotate a bit. So I have to be able to work it out with the section and plan way ahead. So it's tricky, but they're real supportive of it. I wouldn't be able to do something like this if we were on a tour or doing a recording. And this year I've been normally I'm the 4th utility player, which means I fix light bulbs and go get the coffee and stuff. But
hey, how many trumpet players does it take to change a light bulb?
Yeah, it's a utility job. No, basically I'm like.
How many, Andrew?
Yeah, it takes 3. It takes 1 to climb the ladder to change the light bulb, the second one to kick the ladder out from under him, and the third one to say, I knew that was too high for him.
That's awesome. I didn't realize you had an actual joke. I thought you.
Oh yeah.
That's good.
That's all I've got.
Dozens.
I got to remember that.
I like how Lance in his grumpy voice. How many does it take, Andrew?
We're not blowing past that. We're not going to miss an opportunity for a trumpet joke.
No, that was good. I like that.
Yeah, it is a pretty good one. So you used to, or you have played with Lance was talking about all the other things that you've done in addition to solo tours and all sorts of stuff. You've played with Canadian Brass, you've played with Dallas Brass, you've played with Meridian Arts Ensemble. Can you talk about some of those experiences? Any that jump to mind, either for being particularly great or road horror stories or anything in between?
Oh man, the horror stories. That's like 8 podcasts. I can tell you, lots of good stories. Let's see. Well, there's so many good stories. I think the best funny stories are Dallas Brass stories. I'll just say that I really enjoy playing in small groups. Whether it's jazz group, brass quintet, and brass quintets that play jazz for me are just like, I just love doing that. But actually, one of the most inspiring experiences I had was actually I played a couple concerts with Empire, and I've also played with the guys, Mark Reese and Ken, and those guys that with these tours with Elizabeth Von Trapp, the guys that left the group, and they're really fun to travel with. But the couple of times I played with Rolf Smedvig, his one rehearsal in particular, he studied with Maurice Andre and Rafael Mendez, and I understand why he was such an influential trumpet player after sitting next to him, because it was incredible. I mean, you could hear that in his playing. Yeah. And it wasn't always like that, but I did have exposure to playing with him in a way that was so incredibly great and singing and sustained that that you couldn't match it without playing great. I mean, it was really inspiring to do that. So that was really, that was enjoyable. And I learned a lot about stage presence and energy and, how to deal with conflict and all that kind of stuff, in all the groups that I played in.
Wait a minute. You experienced conflict in a chamber group?
Yeah, in a small group of people traveling around in a van together,
That's
for
weird.
like 7 months a year. In the early days, sleeping in the same hotel room together.
Does that sound familiar, Lance?
It seems odd that people would ever have a disagreement. I know.
Well, I mean, not with Lance and I, because we're always so agreeable.
That's right. Okay, I've got a couple of good stories, Dallas Brass stories for you, though. So, let's see.
Did you know that I was in Dallas Brass for like 5 minutes?
No.
Yeah.
Really?
I was for real. Yeah, I was.
I was in the group for. I think I was in the group for like 60 or 70 years. What years were you in?
I was in from November of 1999 until July of 2000.
No, how did I not know? I can't believe I didn't know that.
Hey, man. Yeah, we've got a lot in common. You just haven't noticed. I don't know what else.
If you guys were in at the same time.
Wait. So you started when?
I started in November of '99. I was in with that was Taga's second tour of duty, and Brian.
That's right after I left. That's when I was playing with Meridian.
Yep.
And starving to death in New York City.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
You get for trying to make art.
That I ate a lot of Sbarro pizza and ramen noodles that year.
It's a good way to stay svelte.
Yeah. Wow, no kidding.
There you go.
And ironically, Mike Levine, the guy that runs the group, he is from the Twin Cities, and he lives literally 5 minutes from my house.
Huh.
And the funny thing is, when he lived in Dallas, I would see him all the time. We just run into each other traveling, or he'd come to the Twin Cities. And now that he lives 5 minutes from my house, I absolutely never see him. It's like the weirdest thing. He's like basically a neighbor, and I don't see him.
I had a dream the other night that Mike was in, and he just walked by. Like, we didn't even actually see each other. He just walked by. I have no idea what that means, but I saw him on the other side of the street, and then he walked by, and then that was the end of Mike's portion of my dream.
Did you wet the bed?
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if we have time to unpack that, but yeah. So there you go.
That's interesting. You can. Have you ever done the gestalting technique for dream analysis?
No. Do we need to bleep that out? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's code. You have to look it up. You need to Google it. No, first of all, you don't want to do it on a podcast because you'll reveal really disturbing things about how messed up your brain is.
I think people know.
If you look, you go through the dream first person as you are each character. So you'd start by saying, "I am Mike, and I see Lance," and whatever the circumstance is, and then you establish a feeling with that. And I feel enraged or sad or whatever, and if you have, that person in the dream, which is you, gives advice to yourself. So you say the action, the feeling, and the advice you give. And you go through every character or every symbol. If you dream about a swimming pool, the swimming pool is a character. And then, you'll find out. And then the advice will end up being the same, and then you find out things about yourself you'd never really want to know. There's some armchair psychology for you. You can figure out what your problem with Mike is and what happened to you in your childhood that made you the way you are. You're welcome, by the way.
My band director was a trumpet player.
Okay, so because we're talking about Dallas, I got to tell you a couple of stories here. So the second best story was when Dan Satterwhite, who teaches at Lynn Conservatory down there with Mark Reeves and Ken Amos, was in Dallas for us. He was bass trombone tuba in the group, and good friend of mine. We're both from North Carolina, and he was having a bad day, and I never liked to drive the van, and he would always be pissed at me because I wouldn't drive. So, and this just happened to be a tour where for some reason I was driving the van, which is what we both think is the reason this horrible thing happened. But he was really in a bad mood, and he wanted to treat himself by get himself some sort of gift or toy. So we stopped at a hardware store and got one of those Leatherman like utility knife things that has those really, really sharp serrated blades that you can cut anything with. And so then we started having a trust conversation.
I like this already.
When you're driving, this is the second best story, by the way.
That's all right.
So you're driving, hours and hours with someone. So you start playing games like, okay, we've had an accident. You're trapped under the van, and the only way to save your life is someone has got to use this knife to cut your leg off. And that's the only way you're going to get out. Who are you going to choose to cut your leg off? Which one of us would you choose to do it in the most, be cold enough to do it quickly enough to save your life and not be afraid to do it, but that you would trust? And so just for entertainment's sake, I was picking everyone else other than him, and he really wanted me to pick him as the guy that would cut my leg off. And of course he's getting really irritated because I'm going on and on about why everyone else would be a better choice than him and blah, blah, blah. So, and he starts talking about, he's got the knife open in his lap, and he starts talking about how deeply you could cut and how quickly you could cut, and he talks with his hands a lot. He's gesturing, and his hand keeps moving down. I wish this was a video so you could see the gesture I'm doing. And I see him doing this peripherally, and then there's silence. He stops talking, and he says very calmly, and we are in the middle of nowhere in Illinois. I mean, we're not near anything. And he says, I've hurt myself badly. You need to get me to a hospital. And I looked down, and he slammed his hand down on the sharp side of the blade and cut his hand open. And he says, look, and he shows me his hand, and it looks like a piece of chicken that's been cut open. And amazingly, there was hardly any blood, but I could actually see his tendon. Oh! I had never actually seen a tendon before.
Wow!
But it was like a filleted hand of trombone player.
Wow.
So when you stopped laughing, what did you do?
Well, and this was the '90s, so not everybody had cell phones. So we were having to, like stop at payphones to call people. So speaking of technology and what era we're in, so we stopped at a gas station, and I asked where the nearest hospital was, and some guy comes out. It's like a good old boy, and he's covered in like grease. I don't know. He must have been a mechanic or something. He's like, "Let me take a look at that. Maybe I can help." And he's like trying to figure out if he's going to put tape on it. And his hands are filthy, and meanwhile Dan's sitting there in shock. So anyway, long story short, we get him to a hospital. He goes in for surgery to get this fixed, and we've got a concert that night. And so I can't reach Mike Levine to tell him the situation, and I don't run the group, right? And we had a new trumpet player in the group who's just like, he doesn't know what to do. So I call my friend John Wasson, because he plays tuba and bass trombone. I'm like, get on a plane and come to Illinois. We have a concert tonight, and he wrote half the arrangements so he would be able to play them,
Oh.
And so I hire him. I have no authority to do that. I hire him. And meanwhile, we're calling back and forth. And so what happens then is the nurse says, this is a really long story. Sorry. The nurse says he's going to be in surgery for a while and he's going to be on drugs, so there's no way he's going to be out in time for the concert. And we had just enough time to get there, so we did the only proper thing to do. We left him. We just left him in the hospital. No transportation. Didn't know I forgot to take his stuff out. He's just like stranded at this hospital, and we're stopping at payphones on the way. So it turns out we had gotten bad information from the nurse, and he was actually out.
Oh.
And Mike had eventually gotten the message and was able to reach John, who did have a cell phone, and got him off the plane. He'd already boarded the plane, and he called him on the plane and unhired him.
Oh.
And so he had to get off. He had to get off the plane. So we had to go back to get him. And of course, Dan is even more pissed at me because he thinks the whole thing is my fault because I was driving. And he's got this thing that we call the nub, and it's like this pulley system. It's like this brace on his hand, and it's got all these pulleys on his fingers to stretch his hand back, so the tendon is in the right position. And he's on painkillers, and he's totally high. And we go, and I should mention, we hadn't played in about 2 or 3 days. Like we didn't. Our instruments were in the cargo van, so we didn't even have our instruments. And so they stalled the concert, so Mike and this percussionist Dan Hostler are like, he's like playing rags. Mike's out there telling jokes. They held the audience for an hour and a half telling jokes, and like Mike could play trombone solos, so we drive up, get out of the van. The road manager set up our horns. I don't even know they had the right mouthpieces and the right horns. We walked out on stage, totally cold, Dan with this thing. I don't even know how he held. I think he did everything on tuba, and because he couldn't use his hand for the slide on the trombone, and we played the concert. And the weird thing is, it's one of the best concerts we ever played because there was so much stress, and like it's amazing we could even play a note, especially him.
Wow.
That's incredible.
So I have to interject a super quick Dallas Brass story in between your second best and your first best, because you were talking about driving, and this just popped back in my head, is that we went to Fairbanks, Alaska, and we went about 45 minutes outside of town to the Chena Hot Springs, which is these natural outdoor hot springs in the winter. It was awesome. On the way back, the road was just like a straight road with not even a yellow line in the middle, straight for 20 miles. And it was at night, and I was driving, and Mike was in the back seat, and he was like he was sitting down, but he wasn't buckled in, and it was just such a straight road, and we didn't pass a car for the 20 minutes, so I was driving like 90 miles an hour or something, and there was one really big dip in the road, which when we came out of that dip, we hurled into the air. I mean, we probably
got air. Nice.
Oh yeah, we got air. I mean, it was probably only like a foot of air, but a foot of air feels like you're in the General Lee, And the best part is Mike was woken when he was thrust into the air and hit his head on the ceiling of the car.
Wow.
And then he woke up, and then I just kind of slowed down, and he was like, while he was getting oriented, then I just kind of slowed down. I was like, "Hey man, you having a good nap?" And he goes, "Yeah." And then he went back to sleep. So
he didn't even know what had happened.
No, he didn't even know what happened. So anytime that you can,
didn't kill him. That would have been an awkward, that would have been an awkward explanation, I think.
It would have been a little awkward. So anytime you can wake your boss up by by sending him airborne in your car, then that's good. So anyway,
my takeaway from this is that certain people just shouldn't drive.
Yeah.
So I feel like you and I, like if we ever just had a duo together, I feel like we should have a driver.
We should have a driver.
We should use Ubers for the whole trip.
I'm trying to think of who was in the car with me, if it was Jason Ayub or if it was Taga, but whoever it was like, that was awesome. we were both trying to figure out how I could do that more. But anyway, all right. So now the number one Charles Lazarus Dallas Brass story. Drum roll, please. Excuse me. The number one Dallas Brass Charles Lazarus story that can be shared on a podcast is.
That's correct. Yes, that is correct. Because there are others that I cannot share.
Of course.
And that's mostly why I'm not talking about any of the other groups. There's a lot of things you can't say. But okay, so we were driving into St. Louis, And at this time, Mike was really inspired by a lot of these country artists that had big fancy touring buses. So he bought a 40-foot Eagle tour bus that we didn't sleep in it, but I mean they had the recliners and we had the TV, and it was pretty nice.
I have heard this story. This is a legendary story.
Okay. So Mike probably told it to you. If you ever talked to Dan,
it was
Dan
Hosty.
Dan Satterwhite was not there, but he still tells the story better than anyone. And the bus eventually died because it had mechanical problems, and this is after I left the group. I think Taga was playing this one, but they were loading out of wherever the Philly Orchestra plays, and they smoked out a rehearsal, and they had to stop a rehearsal and take the musicians off stage because black fumes were going into their orchestra hall there. So, in the end, and also, well, there are other stories. Like, I was in the group when the axle broke and the wheels cast the bus.
Yes, that's the one that
fire.
I thought you were going to tell. Was that Hosty tells a good version of that one.
That's not as good as the one I'm going to tell.
When suddenly out the window they saw the wheel of the bus passing the bus. Somebody said, "What the hell is that?"
Is like sideways, and Mike just looked out the window and he's saying, "This is not happening. This is not happening. This is not happening." And of course he's saying, I'm sure he's seeing the dollar signs flash. And we loaded into U-Haul vans to make no, this is better. So we're going into St. Louis. And so we had this a road manager driver. He was doing this annoying thing where every time this was when the group had, instead of a horn, they had a trombone. Jeff Thomas, who's down in Orlando, a great trombone player, played bass trumpet, alto trombone, and then like a small bore tenor for the jazz stuff. And he was trying to tell stories, and Edson, who was the driver, very funny guy, was pretending like he didn't understand anything he said. So he would ask for clarification on everything, just being kind of a nuisance that way. And so, and there was a little jump seat right next to the driver's seat that was kind of like, the mini-me seat, or if you saw the SNL thing where, Trump has the little desk next to Bannon, I don't know if you saw that one. But it was like the mini seat. And that's where I was sitting. And so I thought it would be fun to take some duct tape and tape his mouth shut so he'd stop talking. So that seemed, something to do on the trip. And then we thought, okay, well, and Edson liked to drive with his foot up on the dashboard while he's driving that, the bus with a giant, huge steering wheel, which is of course not very safe. So we taped his foot to the dash, and then we taped his head to the back of the seat. And then we put like a little fake cigarette on top of it, So basically we just tied him up with duct tape while he was driving, because what else are you going to do?
Yeah, sure. It was a Tuesday. I mean,
Yeah. And I was showing some of the guys something with my piccolo trumpet, and then I was trying to be annoying and like practice piccolo trumpet next to him in front of him.
What just happened?
Yeah.
I thought you were talking in code again. It got real tense for a second. But it was actually your piccolo trumpet you're talking about.
It was my
Okay.
it was my actual piccolo trumpet.
Sorry, I mean flugelhorn.
Right, yeah, that's what I really meant.
I mean bass trumpet.
And so then we take the tape off, and it seems fun. But then some guy comes up beside the bus and mouths to Edson, "Are you okay?" And Edson kind of gives him the okay sign. The guy speeds off, takes an exit. About 10 or 15 minutes later, we've got a police car in front of us, unmarked, and there's debate about how many there were. But there were. Everyone agrees there were more than 5. But it started with this one who gets in front of us, slams on the brakes, and when we veer left to go around, he veers left. When we go right, he goes right. So he's stopping us on the highway. And we're, our first thought is, because we don't think that we've done anything strange by taping our driver's head to the,
Yeah, no, that's just normal.
That's normal.
Funny part.
And so he grinds us to a halt, and we're thinking somebody's having a seizure or a heart attack, something like that. And then we see over the median cop cars with their lights flashing coming over the median, and cars behind us. And we were surrounded by police cars. Like, the scene in the Blues Brothers where they've got all the guns pointed at them at the end? That's what it felt like. And so then they cut, and the guy who is like kind of Barney Fife type character in this unmarked car, who was like the county, sheriff department, not the highway patrol, gets out of the car and pulls out a gun and points it directly at me. And his hands are shaking, and he's like, "Get him out of the van, get him out of the bus." And he's pointing a gun at my head. So
he knows you're a trumpet player.
That's right.
We've all fantasized about that before.
Because he knows that I'm trying to, because I heard your podcast with Joey Tartell, and he's got the magic mouthpiece, which is why he plays so high. I heard him say that, and he knew that I was going to try to steal that mouthpiece.
Yeah.
Because I want to be able to play higher than he can. But anyway, so they rescue him. They pry open the doors. They literally throw him out, literally throw him onto the ground.
Wow.
And they question. They come in, they search, and nobody had. They were looking for booze and drugs, and we didn't have any of that. And then they question us. So they're like, "So at any time were you tying anyone up with duct tape?" And we're like, Edson's going to lie. So we're like, "No, sir. Nope, not at any point." And meanwhile, on the dash of the bus, there's this giant ball of wadded up duct tape sitting right there beside him while he's asking us the question. And they questioned us, and then the whoever was in charge came on and questioned. They held us, and it was, and so what the drummer hid behind the desk in the back. He hid under the desk because he was afraid he was going to get shot. And they questioned all of us, and then they knew basically we were just idiots. So we were,
which is not a crime.
It's okay. It's another brass quintet. Never mind. We just had Boston Brass through here last week. Yeah.
Right. And they said they said that the road manager had been kidnapped by these musicians. That's what the guy said. And then when they saw the piccolo trumpet, they thought it was a weapon. And I said, well, it kind of is. Sort of is.
In the wrong hands.
But they thought my trumpet was a weapon. So
they were half right.
There you go. Wow, man.
That is a good story.
Yeah, that's better than Mike banging his head on the ceiling.
My knowledge.
Yeah, I've never actually Rich Kelly, who we are interviewing in 2 hours. We got to ask him about this. In fact, this will just be a tease. We're gonna ask Rich about the time that he was in Oklahoma with Boston Brass and was trying to use the bathroom of a fast food restaurant and found himself at gunpoint by the police. So there you go.
Wow.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that. I went to school with Rich. He's amazing.
Yeah, he is. He's awesome. So yeah, that's.
He could probably listen to this podcast and then. Transcribe, by memory, transcribe every word that we've said and take every letter of every word that we said based on its number in the alphabet and put a musical scale degree to it and then play it in 12 keys.
And then, and I bet he could, before even playing it from front to back first, he could probably do it in reverse order as well.
And I bet he could pick up a car.
At school, I was so amazed at his, when we were at Juilliard together, his pitch is so good. I remember playing a game where I would just play a bunch of random notes on the piano, a dozen notes, and he could just play them back instantly.
It's crazy.
He could do it, in different keys or backwards. I mean, the guy's like a Mozart of the trumpet.
He's an idiot, and I stress idiot savant. So yes. No, he's one of my best friends in the world. We're excited to interview him. So he's got a bunch of good stories too. So, and he and I went down the list of stories that we won't talk about on the podcast. And I kept listing him, and he was like, "Thank you," and then I listened to another one. He goes, "Thank you," and it was pretty funny. So, all right, we got to get you out of here. But super quickly, speaking of chamber musicians, and really the troubles that you can have on the road, our dear friend Jens Lindemann has been going through some difficult chop problems.
I'm sorry, who?
Jens
Lindemann.
Jens.
Yeah. Jens Lindemann.
Oh, the chocolates, like the Lindemann chocolate?
Yeah, exactly. The guy with the Porsche. So he
never heard of him.
Well, if you had heard of him, what would you propose for him in terms of being able to maybe write his chops at this point?
I'm not sure the person you're talking about, but I heard about the chop problems.
Yes,
that I heard about.
Yes,
never heard of him, but I've heard about his chop problems. That guy.
Yes, that guy.
Yeah, it's the German guy, right?
The German guy.
The guy who does the splits and all that.
Yeah, that's him.
Was it? Did he hurt himself doing the split? Is that how he injured himself?
When he kicked, he did the splits and he kicked that music stand, and I think it recoiled and caught him in the face or something. I don't really know.
Actually, it was a serious groin injury that has affected his trumpet playing.
Oh, is that why you switched to piccolo trumpet?
I think so.
That's what I think. I would just say, Godspeed, and keep making the chocolates. Those are really good.
Yeah.
And lots of sleep, like 13, 14 hours a night if possible.
Yeah.
And just practice. And it doesn't really matter the quality of the practice time. Just keep it on the face at any hours that you're awake. That would be my advice.
Speaking of sleeping 13 hours, last night I went to bed on a Friday at 7:45 p.m. and I fell asleep instantly. So that's pretty sad. Children ruin your life.
Yeah.
Everybody, just remember that.
I have a 6-year-old, so
yeah, man.
It's I have a concert, and I'll get home at 2, but he still wakes up at 6:30. So the next day, if there's not a concert, his bedtime is mine too. So I hear you.
My kid's in a 5 a.m. Wake up phase right now. So yeah, he woke up at 3 this morning and was like ready to rock, and I was like, dude, no, this is not okay. Go to bed. So, but anyway, Lance. We were supposed to ask you what you want us to plug. What's the name of your latest CD? Is Lovejoy?
Lovejoy, that's right. Yeah, it's fun. It's produced by, and the keyboard player on it is Tommy Barbarella, who he played with Prince in the New Power Generation for about 10 years, and it's really a pop album. I mean, we cover half of it are jazz standard covers, but kind of R&B, neo soul treatments of those tunes, and then the other half of it are all originals. And it's sort of pop jazz crossover. It's a lot of fun, and they're all love songs because
awesome.
We all love each other.
And the Hummel and the Haydn both, or?
Yeah, just the third movement of the Hummel up an octave as an encore.
Only up one octave, huh? There you go.
Yeah, but it's on the guitar. It's easier.
Now that actually makes more sense.
Actually, I would buy that. So, and you can find everything Charles at charleslazarus.com. We will link to his latest album and to his website in the show notes. And Charles, thank you so much for taking time out from your touring schedule to join us this morning.
That's my pleasure. It's always fun talking to you guys. Thanks for having me.
Have a great day. That was a blast. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And that will do it for another episode of The Brass Junkies. You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to help support the podcast in order to make more episodes like this one possible, please visit pedalnotemedia.com/donate for more details. Also, be sure to check out our latest recording, The Brass Recording Project, at brassrecordingproject.com. The Brass Junkies is produced by Joey Santillo. Executive producers are Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.